So in this first lecture on Mary, what we want to cover is her uniqueness, the fact that there are 4 dogmas, and we'll go into the first one, Mother of God. Okay? So first of all, Mary's uniqueness. Why does the Catholic Church always talk about Mary, right? So much so that a lot of non-Catholic Christians are confused. There's always these people saying, Mary, worship Mary this, Mary's on par with God, and da-da-da-da-da with Catholics, which isn't the case, right? It's a misunderstanding of the Catholic teachings on Mary and the Catholic, I guess, thought about Mary, right? But we want to highlight this, right? Probably to start it off, to say this, that if God, right? Oh, shnikes. If God himself, right, came to Mary, then maybe we should not be so pompous as to say we shouldn't, right? Or to say, oh, she's just a little blah, blah. God himself went to Mary, right? So maybe we can take that as a cue if we want to be godlike, right? Right? Okay. If Jesus had Mary as his mommy, right, how do you think Jesus treats his mommy? How do you think we should treat our mommies, first of all? And then how do you think we should treat the mommy of Jesus, right? That's another way to put it, okay? Mary, mother of the members of Christ, right? Because remember, Jesus' mom, right? And I'm sure he goes above and beyond respecting his mom, right? And loving his mom more than any of us do, right? Think of the commandment, right? Honor the father and mother. Okay, the mother of the members of Christ. Remember, Christ died, and we become, in a real way, the body of Christ. When we take on the grace of Christ, we become Christ, right? Christ enters into our hearts. Paul says in Galatians 2:20, yet I live no longer I, but Christ lives in me. Christ lives in me. When we partake in the body of Christ at the Last Supper and every Eucharist, we take Jesus within us. So the Christian way, remember, through grace, is a reality of becoming Christ, not just following Christ and becoming Christ-like. That too is important, right? If we want to be Christ-like, we should honor our mothers and his mother. But we also are, in a mystical way, becoming Christ himself, right? We are becoming the body of Christ. And so in that way, we should and must, right, treat Mary as our mother if we are calling ourselves Christ, right, and the body of Christ. Think of that. She's hailed as a preeminent and singular member of the church. Why is that? As a type of excellent exemplar in faith and charity. In that she, right, followed God in a way greater and more obediently than any other member of humanity, right? That's sort of what we want to point out with Mary and why we talk about Mary so much. She is the perfect realization of the church and the supreme manifestation of love, holiness, and faithful obedience. That is, what is the church supposed to be? Look at Mary's constant yes and love and obedience to the will of God. What are you and I supposed to be? Again, look at how Mary constantly and humbly says, not my will, but Lord's will be done, right? That's what it's all about. That's why Mary, Mother of God, is so important. That's why Mary and our emphasis on Mary is important. Okay, so after speaking of the church then, right, and the role of the church and what the church is supposed to do and the church's connection to Christ, we can find no better way than to conclude this whole semester by looking at Mary, because she is the perfect exemplar of what the church is to be, of what we're supposed to be, of what pilgrimage of faith is all about. What she will be at the homeland at the end of the journey, what we're going towards, right? All this talk, okay? The person of Mary then helps us understand and come to love the church and what the church is to be and what we're supposed to be within it, right? So that takes us into this understanding of why Mary and why the church says all it does about Mary. Mary is, why the church says what it's saying. Oh, I just drew a blank. I'll get it. Why the church says all it says about Mary is that everything the church says about Mary, right, is to highlight who her son is and to emphasize God, right? So every teaching about Mary we're going to see is really talking about Jesus. And Mary is sort of a result of, but also sort of an exemplar then of our relationship with Christ. Okay, God chose Mary from all eternity to be the mother of his son. Keep that in mind, right? His plan of salvation began to unfold immediately after the original sin. Remember? The proto-evangelium. We get our first glimpse of Mary, right? God tells the serpent, I'll put enmity, right, between you and the woman, complete separation, right? And between your seed and hers. Mary and Jesus, right? Okay. Continuing on. Okay. Got it. So, the promised woman. In the New Testament, we encounter this woman when God promised in Genesis, right? God called her woman at the wedding at Cana. Remember John's gospel? Christ says woman. And at the foot of the Christ, right? Woman. St. John describes her in the book of Revelation as the woman, right? So there we have in all these emphasis, St. John's saying this is the woman, right? That's John's full emphasis, is saying this is the woman. From the beginning of his book to the end and the book of Revelation, he is highlighting that Jesus is the Son in Genesis, and Mary is the woman in Genesis, right? Okay. So, just as salvation began with three characters, Eve, Adam, and the serpent, so too it ends with three characters. Christ, the new Adam, Mary, the new Eve, and Satan, right? The serpent who's defeated on the cross. Okay. Lastly, the church teaches 4 dogmas. What are dogmas? Solemn doctrinal definitions about marriage. Dogmas are teachings of the church that must be believed by the members of the church. Right? Dogmas are teachings, clarifications. They may come throughout the last 2,000 years, but they're teachings from the beginning of the church, right? John's even talking about it from his very first book, right? But they become dogmas when the church clarifies it when there's uncertainty in the world in the last 2,000 years. When people start to question it, then the church stamps it with its approval, right? And clarifies it and teaches it. This is the teaching, right? So it's not like the church is making up rules in the 1850s when it talks about Immaculate Conception. No, it's just clarifying, putting its stamp of approval in 1850 about a teaching that's gone off for 1,800 years. Does that make sense? Hopefully you got that. Write that down, because that's important about what a teaching and a dogma of the church is. Okay, so here are the main 4 dogmas. Mary's divine motherhood. That's really about countering heresy about Jesus. Mary's perpetual virginity, which is really talking about Christ and who Christ is. Mary's immaculate conception, also very important, talking about who Christ is, right? And Mary's assumption into heaven. Okay? Motherhood, virginity, immaculate conception, assumption. Those are the 4 dogmas of the church. So we'll get into those in the next couple lectures.